Wednesday evening, the 7th of March 2018. Good evening. My name is Michelle Ngele. Tonight we focus on the gains made and the challenges that still lie ahead in the quest for gender parity in the country. Across the world, celebrations for World Women's Day are expected to climax tomorrow, the 8th of March 2018. Well, here in Kenya, events are on, including a forum presided over by the First Lady, Margaret Kenyatta. This year's theme is Push for Progress, and shall be engaging great minds and activists tonight to establish the milestones made so far. But as usual, we begin with our lead reporter here on the big story, Sophia Wanuna. Let's first listen in, though, to what First Lady Margaret Kenyatta had to say.
Youth. Despite this, however, we continue to strive for social change that will provide marginalized and vulnerable groups with an equal opportunity to thrive. Preventable and treatable diseases that include acute respiratory infections, malaria, and diarrhea continue to be leading causes to child mortality in Kenya. In addition, access to quality maternal health care, especially in arid and hard-to-reach areas, continue to impede our efforts to save the lives of mothers while giving birth. As I end, I ask that we focus our attention to the issues that continue to challenge us, to collectively make a commitment to carry out the theme of this conversation today, to transform the lives of women and children, to transform Africa through action.
All right, well, on the program tonight is Priscilla Nyokabi, the former women representative for Nyeri County in the National Assembly. Nyokabi is a lawyer who's also served as the executive director of Kituo cha Sheria. She will be joining us on the program. Ogutu Okudo is also with us on the show. She is the county manager, Spring Rock Energy, and founder, Women in Energy and Extractives Africa. Also on the show is renowned gender activist Catherine Omanyo, the director of Women Candidates and Network, Wokan, and a political analyst here in the country. From the corporate world, we're joined by Betty Wababu, the Chief Executive Officer of WABCOM. We'll be discussing gender parity with them. But let's first of all take a look then at some of the progress that we've seen in the country in terms of, gender equality. But first of all, let's bring in Sophia Wanuna, our lead reporter, who is joining us from our city center studios. Sophia, this is a day that offers another great opportunity to take stock of the progress as well as the challenges that the world as well as the country is facing in ensuring gender parity. Bring us up to speed with some of the progress that we've seen so far.
Good evening, Michelle. Yes, as the world marks International Women's Day tomorrow, again, the focus is back on that conversation in as far as what steps, if at all, and advancements has Kenya made so far to be able to achieve gender parity. So it was seen as a huge success upon the promulgation of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, when in there you have an article that touches on the question of gender equality and that not more than 2/3 of either gender should occupy any elective or appointive position. Whilst that was a positive step, that was good news, but that was 8 years ago. And all these years later, Parliament, which was charged to come up with a mechanism to implement this and to operationalize this particular clause, has not done that. This is a matter, Michelle, that has come up for debate in Parliament, both houses, as well as in courts, even to the highest, the apex court in the land, the Supreme Court, and in 2012 directing Parliament to make sure they put in place a mechanism to implement this not more than 2/3 gender rule by 2015. That deadline came and passed. The debates and the kind of proposals we've been able to see in the past several years on how to be able to operationalize this principle largely touch on topping up so that however many women are elected, which are not very many right now with the current Parliament, we only have about 19%, which again again falls short of that 30% in the National Assembly and Senate put together. So largely the proposals, as I mentioned, have been that whoever is elected, whatever shortfall is there, you add members. And remember, Kenya is already dealing with a huge representation across the board. And you talk to people, they'll talk about large representation, so that if to be able to meet this principle is to add more people, the wage bill will go off the roof, will hit the roof in as far as that. So that is a proposal that has not sailed when it has come up for debate. Then you had last year, in this month, March, the High Court finding that in fact women are being discriminated against, that their rights are not being met. Another time giving again Parliament 60 days to be able to come up with a formula. Those 60 days came past, here we are, about 9 months later, still nothing has happened. So is there political will is the big question. Many will argue not. The president right now in his current cabinet still falling short of that rule and principle as well, because at that level where he's appointing, he is able to be to facilitate and furnish and present a picture to the country that would show confidence as well as a determination and will to be able to have this representation from women. So whether it's in the courts, you've seen the rulings come through, the directives, but the same have not been met. Last year in December, I interviewed the leader of Majority, Aden Duale, and I brought this question to him when he talked about his record in as far as legislation is concerned, talking about the great things they had done, but on challenging him on why they had not been able to implement this. He argued that it's just the patriarchal nature of Kenya's society, that the men in parliament will argue or not see any value, quote unquote, if you like, in doing the same, which is unfortunate because some of the debates that we've seen in parliament around this, you see women appealing to this male legislators, talking about them, you know, being born of women, mothers, having wives, sisters, and other, you know, kind of relations, that they should embrace this and see this as empowering their very own in ensuring that this formula is put in place. But Michelle, also just looking to neighboring Rwanda, they have done extensively well in as far as getting women in public office, whether it's in politics, whether it's in business. Their numbers are really good, and that is one of the countries that many will reference in as far as borrowing from to make sure that Kenya gets into a better position. So here we are celebrating International Women's Day. Kenya is in a very prime position to be able to make this a reality. However, it appears in the House, the leaders we elect as Kenyans do not have the will to see that this comes to pass. And Michelle, as I bring it back to you, another unfortunate part of this whole conversation is that the larger electorate in this country is women, so that you'd imagine women would then go ahead and elect willfully out of their own volition more women, but that does not happen. But again, a little bit of progress. We now have 3 women governors. So baby steps perhaps is what some would argue we are witnessing in this country, but there's still so much more, and perhaps more political will and more effort to be put in place to ensure that actually this becomes a reality in Kenya. Michelle.
All right, indeed. That is our big report, our lead reporter here on the big story, Sophia Wanune, there from our city center studios, and how to further enhance gender equality is the basis of discussion on the big story tonight. Let's first give you a sneak peek of the progress that has been seen so far in terms of gender equality and the place of women in the country. This began in 2010 with the new, with the promulgation of the Constitution, there, Article 81B of the Constitution of 2010, articulating that not more than 2/3 of members of elective public bodies shall be of the same gender. And this went hand in hand with the Article 27(8) of the Constitution there, which again reiterates that not more than 2/3 of members of the elective or appointive bodies shall be of the same gender. Now, this has been a big debate in the country as to the attainment of the 2/3 gender rule in the country. And we've seen Parliament twice fail to pass the 2/3 gender rule. We've seen the inclusion of the judiciary, the Supreme Court also coming in to say there should be a progressive implementation of affirmative action. But women have been crying foul, especially even threatening to take Parliament to court for failure to attain the two-thirds gender rule. Will this be the tenure, of President Uhuru Kenyatta for the next 5 years? Will he finally be able to implement the two-thirds gender rule? Only time will tell. But there has been much more progress made, especially in terms of sexual and gender-based violence. When it comes to Anti-FGM Act of 2011, it is an act that prohibits female genital mutilation there. The act also protects the physical integrity of the women, such that any offenders are to face 3 years jail term or a fine of 200,000 shillings. It is a discussion we'll be having on the show. Could this conversation and could female genital mutilation be making its comeback in the country? We already have a case at the Machakos High Court there with a Dr. Tatu Kamau, who is advocating for the dismissal of the Anti-FGM Act 2011, terming it as discriminatory. But other than that, we've also seen several a lot of progress being made in terms of empowering women in business, and this has been seen through the Women Enterprise Fund there, which was a flagship project under Vision 2030. It is a fund that tackles women marginalization from the mainstream economy, one that provides affordable credit to women in business. And this has seen many women able to take care of their families through the Women Enterprise Fund. Issues of corruption have, however, and mismanagement have come up when it comes to this fund. So it is a conversation we'll also be having in a bit more detail. Also, more progress made has been in maternal and child care. The Linda Mama initiative there now being one of the biggest progresses made there by the Jubilee administration when it comes to healthcare. So it is a public-funded health scheme which has now partnered with NHIF to promote access to quality health services to women across the country. It is targeting women, newborns and children. In fact, this particular initiative targets children up to 3 months old, so women and children up to until that age are covered, as well as 1 year free outpatient and inpatient services. And this has been seen as a big step for the Jubilee administration and for Kenya in attaining the Millennium Development Goals 4 and 5. But other than the progress that we've seen in the implementations, several challenges have been witnessed in attaining gender equality in the country, and especially further cementing the place of the woman in society. One of the challenges there is pro-FGM arguments. And like I mentioned, the Machakos High Court has a case pending filed by a certain Dr. Tatu Kamau, who is now advocating for the reinstatement of FGM, female genital mutilation. And she says the Anti-FGM Act that we have discriminates against women. And she says that banning FGM further embraces Western culture. Remember, this is a practice that is deeply rooted in societal norms. Many have termed it as a practice rooted in patriarchy. But she says women need to be able to choose whether they want to have female genital mutilation carried out in certified medical institutions. And other than that, of course, women in the National Assembly and women in politics has been another setback for the country. And like Sophia Onuna there mentioned, we have seen quite a lot of progress really in the place of the woman in politics in the country. The total number of elected members of parliament so far is 290, but the elected women members of parliament only stand at 23, and this again gives a deficit of 74 in the two-thirds gender threshold. All right, and again, the women in the Senate falling short of that threshold, but it is a discussion we will be having in just a moment. The women in Senate there have about 47 elected women senators. Two-thirds gender threshold there requires 16, and that brings a deficit of 13 members of parliament. Like I mentioned, on the program tonight, we'll be speaking to Priscilla Nyokabi, who is a former women representative for Nyeri County. I will also be speaking in just a moment to Ogutu Okudo, who is also with us, the country manager for Spring Rock Energy and the founder of Women in Energy and Extractives in Africa. But let me first begin with Catherine Omanyo, who is a gender activist. Catherine, many thanks for joining us tonight. Again, a big opportunity for women in the country to take stock of the progress that has been made so far. And what catches our attention most is really the two-thirds gender rule and the place of women in politics in the country. We're still falling short of the same. Your thoughts on that?
I'm just glad that more women at the moment, comparing to other years, have their eyesight on the bull's eye, because we have more women who come up to vie, to compete fairly with male counterparts. And this shows that most women are not just going to be sitting pretty and wait to be nominated, or use any other bizarre ways of getting to power. And I think as they continue doing that, what we must continue pushing, unfortunately, is the Constitution to be observed, because it is annoyingly bad to continue reminding even the leadership in government that the two-thirds gender rule has not been observed. At the moment, the Parliament and the Senate is unconstitutional. In fact, it should be dissolved because it does not balance or look into what they are supposed to be looking into when it comes to the two-thirds gender rule. And I'm saying this today because the male counterparts, they think that it is only the women that have a problem. It will reach a time when also men will run short of numbers, and they will be looking into this two-thirds gender rule to help them out. So it's not a matter of just women here. But because today it is the women who have their numbers falling short, we are saying that the handshake of the government does not match their smile when they say that they will go according to the rule of law, and it doesn't when it comes to the implementation side.
All right, let's bring in Ogutu Okudo. I mean, so far, at the end of the day, progress has been made in the place of women in politics. I mean, we have about 6 women in the cabinet secretary positions and in rather strong positions like the Ministry of Lands, the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but that still falls far short of the two-thirds gender threshold. How do we begin then to ensure that this tenure for the Jubilee administration is able to achieve the two-thirds gender rule?
Thank you, Michelle. Firstly, I think it's worth noting, it's very important that it's very disappointing that we have a government that chooses when to adhere to the rule of law and when not to. The two-thirds gender rule should be something that should have been passed and should be adhered to as we're speaking right now. I'd like to further emphasize what my colleague just spoke about, saying that the government should be dissolved as we speak right now, and Parliament should be dissolved, because if we cannot comply and we cannot follow the rule of law, it is very disappointing. When we look at the different caveats that are within the Constitution, we will see that indeed, as much as the 2010 Constitution has made a lot of progress, there are amendments and need for amendments to be taken part of. And part of these are, for example, if we look at some of the special seats allocated to women, we are trying to advocate, let's move these from 47 to 136. And how we plan to do so is, if you look at the 290 constituencies in Kenya, and you look at constituencies that have even numbers of representatives within, if you take these constituencies and you say every 2 constituencies are going to elect a woman who will serve as a member of parliament, then we're talking about actually truly doing meaningful work to increasing women public participation.
All right, so Okudo rather brings in the issue of possible need for amendments to ensure that there is more women in this position. Let's bring in Priscilla Nyokabi. She is joining us from our city center studios. She is the former women representative from Nyeri County. Having worked as a policy maker, what then do you think needs to be amended to ensure that the two-thirds gender rule can be implemented?
progress. There are many more women now in politics. For the first time, we have women who are governors, we have women who are senators, elected senators, and not just the nominated slots. But it is true that the constitution should change, which was the clamor we had in the 11th Parliament. Amendment of Articles 97 and 98 to bring in the 2/3 into the National Assembly and the Senate. The Senate is very close because of the 16 special seats. The National Assembly is much, much further. So that is still pending, and the 12th Parliament is going to be looking at that amendment. There was one bill that was voted upon. There was a second bill that was not voted on. So I think the 12th Parliament will be reviving that debate. On the cabinet, I think effort again and good progress in terms of the 6 strong portfolios that women are holding. But the Constitution has what we call silences, constitutional silences. And sometimes where the Constitution does not prescribe the 2/3 as it doesn't do for cabinet, it becomes a little bit difficult to hold government to a standard that has not been put in by the Constitution. The best standard for all of us is actually gender equality, which is 50-50. Even the Constitution's 2/3 is a negotiated agreement at a minimum level, so 2/3 is minimum. What we are looking at is the efforts around a gender parity, gender equality, a country where men and women are equal in all fronts, not just politics, be it in corporate, be it in agriculture, be it in economics, be it in land ownership. We still have a long way to go.
All right, let me bring back Catherine Omanyo. Considering that the gender gap continues rising, not just in the country, but globally, in the past year, in 2017, we saw several campaigns from women who were campaigning against being paid less than their male counterparts were in those same positions. But let's talk about failure to close the gender gap and how that would reflect in the attainment of goals like the Sustainable Development Goals, the Millennium Development Goals, and more importantly, the big 4 pillars that President Uhuru Kenyatta has highlighted as part of his core mission in this tenure?
In theory, the agenda is just pretty. It's like gold. But pragmatically, unfortunately, somebody somewhere plays a game. It's like filibustering, you know, something that you just don't understand what happens. Our president is very good at promising the world to the women when it comes to campaigning. But when it comes to, you know, now the real action, there is something that is happening. This is his second term, and he could have brought out his A game in making sure that he implements what he actually promised. But it's like we just have to keep on begging. Even Vision 2030 and those other beautiful goals that are written out there, I'm afraid that if we don't keep banging doors, which we will, and we are already doing, and we might be dodged. And I think it is also good for women who are already in those positions to come out in numbers and help out to attain these. But as things sit now, I think even as we celebrate tomorrow, the Women's Day, Kenya still is wallowing in the miasma of corruption and bribery. This just many things that when a woman is in position, I think even rivers can run upstream. But unfortunately, nobody sees that. And just, I think it's just annoying. I've run more than 3 times in this country, and I know the challenges that a woman faces. In fact, there's a section in the Constitution that says that any candidate who has run is not supposed to be nominated. They need to repeal that section and top up a little to accommodate all the women, because our traditions and how people just look at a woman in Kenya today is not yet like those civilized and developed nations. So even in developed nations, I think a woman is still having a long trek, a long walk in achieving the balance that we are talking about.
We'll be discussing, you know, where really all this finger pointing is leading us. But before we take a short break, let me bring in Priscilla once again. Even as we talk need for amendments and need for more policy to ensure more women in the public space. I mean, Sophia Onuna there mentioned women make up a majority of the electorate in the country. So as much as Parliament is unable to pass a 2/3 gender rule, where are we going wrong in terms of women supporting women?
I think it's quite a big or a long story, because culture plays on people's minds. We've seen even after FGM has been outlawed, somebody advocating for voluntary FGM. So it really is a socialization, is culture, is a lot of the ideas that people have. So that by the time you come to leadership, those are the cultural beliefs that you carry upon. When we are on the floor, when we were on the floor of Parliament and trying to push the 2/3, some men would rise up and say, that would not be acceptable in my community. And so it isn't just a change of leadership, it's also and a change among the leaders. It's also a change in the country. How are men treating their sons and daughters? How are we treating our sisters? As a society, how are we fighting gender-based violence? How are we responding to a man who we hear beats his wife? What is our perception of that man? And sometimes you find the man who beats his wife is the church elder, is a church pastor, and we have no problem with that. So it's really not just the leaders. I think that there's a role for leaders. It is indeed true some of these issues are supposed to be in laws, but there's a lot more that the society has got to do. Eradicating FGM, eradicating illegal marriage, making sure that girls are taking sciences and maths, making sure that many of us are in the engineering courses, so that by the time we are talking about the 2/3, it is a holistic picture. So the challenges still remain, and the challenges are not just for government, the challenges are actually for the entire society. I'm yet to see, even for us women, that when you are sharing your property among your children, that you share equally to the sons and to the daughters. And that's really, even though it is good when the Constitution provides for it, it is much better when a father says, my son and my daughter are equal. Whatever I give my son is the same thing I'm going to give my daughter. And you don't sometimes need any law for a father to do that. What you need is a change of culture, is a change of societal beliefs, is a country where men and women are playing on the same side to make our country develop. If you look at the big four programs, for example, for the president, they very much touch on women. It is health, it is manufacturing, it is food security, it is housing. So we want to see how is the women agenda covered in the big four that the president has promised, not just in terms of the ministerial policies, but in actual real sense, how do the lives of Kenyan women change in the big four areas? Do we see more women accessing healthcare? And for that to happen, it just won't be what the president is going to do. It's going to be a lot also what county governments do. It's a lot of what many other levels of government are going to do. So there's a lot of work for us, even as we celebrate tomorrow. The country has a lot of work in terms of making sure that men and women are equal, the boy child and the girl child are equal.
Maternal and child health care is what we'll be discussing when we come back from this short break. I'd like to hear your thoughts and comments on the focus of discussion in studio tonight, and that is the gains made and challenges that still lie ahead in the quest for gender parity in the country. The hashtag is the big story. You can also tweet me directly at Michelle Ngele or at KTN News. I will be sampling your thoughts and comments in the course of this live broadcast. Stay with us.
Sisi tuko na shida maji, hata tuonangi wazee wetu. Tunaamuka saa 7 usiku, tunaenda kunyemelea maji, tuko wengi. Ng'ombe ziko hapo, mbuzi ziko hapo, watu wako hapo, na tunakosa maji mpaka saa hii hata tujapata maji. Nimetoka nyumbani saa 7 usiku na saa hii ni saa 2 na bado sijapata maji.
And they're just the voices of women across the country, that particular one being from Turkana County, just highlighting some of the wars they have to go through. They are walking for kilometers, waking up at 1 a.m. To go fetch water. And they say this has a big impact on their families because they barely get to even see their husbands. And it is the focus of discussion tonight. The gains made and challenges that still lie ahead in attaining gender parity in the country. Let me begin with you, Ogutu Okudo. And some of these women, other than just waking up so early, walking such long distances, have to also walk such similar distances while pregnant to access maternal services. And this is, Millennium Development Goals 4 and 5, dealing with child and maternal mortality. The latest reports show that these are the programs with the least progress, not just globally, but also in the country. What are your thoughts on the same, and how far Kenya has come in attaining maternal and childcare?
Thank you, Michelle. Firstly, it's worth noting that the gender divisions of labor are something that still seem to be circumvented by governments, not only in Kenya, but in sub-Saharan Africa. When you listen to the clip and you listen to the woman talking about waking up at early hours and having to collect this energy, the energy that she is gathering, this is what powers households all around the country, the firewood, the clean water. So when we talk about the strides we're making towards achieving the sustainable development goals, and in particular goals number 4 and 5, then we definitely have a lot of work to do. In line with goal number 4, which is increasing our maternal health and access to maternal health care, it would not be far from true to say that Kenya truly is lying behind. It would not be far from the truth also to additionally add that we also are aware of the scandals that have taken place within the Ministry of Health, and especially when it comes to the Beyond Zero campaign and advocating for maternal health clinics for women based in this country. And keeping in mind that some of the saddest statistics come when you look at the number 1 cause of death for girls aged 15 to 19 in Kenya is dying through giving birth. So we ask ourselves, what truly are we doing? If these statistics for the last 5 to 7 years are not changing, are we actually making strides in our Beyond Zero campaign and in ensuring we have accessible and affordable access to maternal health care?
All right, Catherine, let me bring you in because the Linda Mama program is one that is being highlighted as some of the biggest gains of the Jubilee administration. It's now partnered with NHIF to include more women when it comes to maternal and child care. In fact, statistics show that the number of women that are seeking medical assistance during their pregnancy is doubling in the country. How far, though, do we have to go in ensuring that the goal is achieved?
I think Jubilee government needs to do a bottom-up approach. I'm very sure there are niches in Kenya that have not even felt that. I have a community, a small village where I come from, that we have women who are stranded. They have to give birth even in their houses because all these gifts that they keep dangling in air, they are not there. They are not being, trickled down to the real Wanjiku in the village. And also, there's this scarcity of nurses, doctors. There are places in this nation where even a doctor is something very rare to come across. And I think it's a good idea, but then we need to add more people to serve Kenyans. And the explosive costs in the health sector is another thing. It's easy to say that mothers will get free, maternities and everything, but there are hidden costs that a woman who does not make even $0.25 a day, when they think of such costs, they go risking into trying their traditional ways of even giving birth. And that has really costed a lot of lives in Kenya. And I think that the idea that has been tossed around is good, yes, but there's so much that we still need to push to attain that. Even the roads to some of these clinics or dispensaries or hospitals, they are just in a quagmire. A tire can easily disappear in a pothole in those villages I'm talking about because I stay in the village more times than the city. So we need Kenya to be balanced, that even a woman in the village, when they talk about these benefits, it reflects on this other woman in the city. It should not be just few women who have access to social amenities and not this other Wanjiku, where Wanjikus are the majority, and the Wanjikus are the people who are still having the limited, formal education. So I think the government has a good idea. The 4 agendas are beautiful, but now how to trickle to reach the real Mwananchi is the problem.
All right, and that then brings in the issue of policy implementation and then accountability of some of these projects that are being put forth. And that is for you, Priscilla. How then do we ensure accountability? Because as Catherine mentions, some of these programs are active in areas where roads do not facilitate such programs. There's also issues of hidden costs that would discourage women from further following up on the same programs such as Linda Mama and the inclusion of NHIF as well.
I think there's a big whole debate for this country on matters health. Devolution doesn't seem to have helped the problem. So there's a lot of policy work that is pending on health. Not just the dispensaries and the smaller hospitals, but even the big hospitals, the level 5s. So the president having touched and having put his hand on healthcare, I think that's a big thing. I hope that he is prepared and the government is prepared to go the whole hog and to really open up health systems in this country. And it is a debate that is important in the sense that the Constitution devolves health, but then the governance and the county governments don't seem to have been as ready to receive this function. So there's a whole lot of work there that needs to be done. And I agree that when healthcare is not working, women suffer more. It is really, really sad in a country like ours for a mother to lose life when they are trying to bring life into this country. I think that is something that shouldn't happen in this country and in this day and age. And that the whole lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that Wanjiko at whatever corner can access medical services, I think that needs to be done. The NHIF has started well. The numbers are good, but those numbers can be improved. We are in a country where 19.6 million voted in the last election or were in the voters register. So I think that those are the kind of numbers that we want to hear for NHIF. We want to hear that 19 million Kenyans are covered by NHIF. So policy work pending to be done. But then also the implementation work.
All right, and Priscilla, many times we have legislators, talking about issues like this, and they mention, what could have gone wrong within Parliament. I mean, you were a member of Parliament when Uhuru Kenyatta's administration failed to implement the 2/3 gender rule. So where could the problem be, and how can it be rectified in this new Parliament?
I think that a lot more negotiation needs to be done on gender matters. I know that those of us who are lawyers and those of us who read the Constitution would insist on full and total implementation. We tried that route. It didn't quite achieve the results that we expected. And then the pressure from Wanjiko herself. These matters of women or the issues of women, it's become a little bit... the accusation we had in Parliament all along was women's rights is only for urban women. Women's rights is only for educated women. It is time that every woman out there puts her voice onto women's rights being an issue. Even for example, in media, the only reason we are having this chapter and these discussions is because tomorrow is International Women's Day. I think that even on a normal day, it can't just be politics. We must put these issues as societal issues. So when it comes to Parliament, you then find that the resistance in the society will then be exhibited by some of the members of Parliament. And I could name some of the regions are a little bit more difficult to navigate. I mean, we found Western very, very difficult on matters women. We found the Luhya land in particular, quite difficult. But you will find that many men in Parliament, although we had the 195 members who supported the bill, we needed 233 for the bill to pass. So it is up to us in terms of the citizens to make sure that our members of Parliament in all the 290 constituencies carry this message. And so when they come to the floor, they then push the bill. I wouldn't attack government because the bill came in as a government bill. Both bills were actually government bills brought in by the majority leader. But we also want to see the language and the action to follow. If you support women's rights during the day, then when you go to the vote, we want to see your vote for women's rights. And we don't want to have this it's almost not a good thing to be a women's rights activist or a women's rights advocate. We want to see that women's rights activists and women's rights advocates are also just well received. And there's a difference between being a women's rights activist and being a feminist. Women's rights is about the issues we are discussing, that healthcare is reaching all the women, water, for as long as women are spending 3 or 4 hours a day looking for water, then the country can progress well. So let us make it an everyday discussion. So it's not just tomorrow when we are marking the International Women's Rights Day. Let's have this conversation next week. Let's have it the week after until action is taken, until the policies that we are looking for have then been put in paper and then are followed by implementation.
Let's talk about the women who are actually doing something other than, you know, this big day, International Women's Day. Ogutu Okudo is actually also the founder of Women in Energy and Extractives Africa. And it is an industry, really, that women aren't usually seen. We're living in an era where men's salaries are actually rising more than women in the same level of work, making gender equality a piped dream, so to speak. And we've seen a lot of women speaking out against disparities in their pay. What has been your experience on the same?
Thank you, Michelle, again. My experience starts off, a year ago I sat in this exact same seat and I was speaking to one of your journalists discussing International Women's Day. And actually, I would like to add on what Priscilla commented, that in fact, the plight we have to achieving women empowerment and International Women's Day only just starts tomorrow. Tomorrow starts the culmination of us and the work we need to do to be able to achieve this. Last year when I sat in this same position, I talked about Spring Rock Energy, the company I'm working with, which is an oil and gas company working in the upstream sector. We have achieved 60% of all our staff in Africa are women. And that's where you begin. You begin to start taking the role and ensuring that you yourself are doing your bigger part. Before we went into the break, there was something you discussed about retrogressive cultural practices. When we look at the African standpoint, and even in Kenya, for example, Kilifi County is the #1 county with the #1 most gender-based violence cases. And we keep asking ourselves, why is there such a huge dropout of young girls from going to class 8 and proceeding to the high school? And it all comes into, we are challenging and we want women to be able to question what are some of these cultural practices that are against us and are working against the progress of women and young girls. And being able to discuss these things in such forums is what creates this sort of narrative and this conversation to be able to take this forward. When I started Women in Energy and Extractives in 2011, we started with 4 members, and we started just based off looking at what was happening in the Niger Delta. Young women carrying water and balancing an act with a child on her hip, discussing about what exactly and how exactly are women affected by the energy and extractive sectors. Here in Kenya right now, we have over 800 members. In Africa, we have a total of 1,693 members in 11 countries, serving in oil, gas, mining, alternative energy sources, and as well as nuclear. Can you imagine? So this just shows you that the kind of capacity and the kind of capability women have and young girls have as well. And that is why it's so important to look at it from a sustainable approach. When you look at it from a sustainable approach, you realize that being able to advocate for STEM, which is the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics classes, from a very young age for girls is what really does act as a catalyst for being able to expose them to some of these different industries that have always been stereotyped as male-dominated. Right. And pushing them in this direction, we've been able to see. Last year, we were able to impact over 50,000 Kenyan girls in different schools around the country who are going towards the end of their Form 2, as that is when they choose their courses. So all of this coming together just shows that there is an opportunity, but the most important key lies in recognizing women as stakeholders in their own right, not only taps upon their economic potential, but serves as a catalyst in the communities they serve.
All right, and that's a very strong point. There are many things that is Ogutu Okudo. Before we wind up the conversation, let's bring it back to Catherine. Your closing comments on this. How can we dismantle this architecture of gender inequality as a necessary precursor for progress in the country?
I think both men and women should look at each other as partners for us to progress well and not as threats, because few men that I've been talking to, they still have, they struggle with women in leadership, and most of them, some of them tell me, you know, when we elevate you guys, when we promote you, you will have more, you know, longer horns, like they need to keep dehorning us, and that is so wrong for them to look at women in leadership like that. They should know that the only safe ship in a storm is women in leadership, and any nation that ignores such untapped reservoir, then it won't achieve as fast as it could have done in whatever agenda they want to achieve. So I think we should not look at each other, men and women, as possible threats, but as a team player in each other. And I think with that, Kenya being a nation that most younger African nations and other growing nations look at, I think we should set that pace to be a model in such countries. And what is really bad is that Rwanda's advisor to the government comes from Kenya. He's a professor. And now what happens to this nation that has thinkers like those? What just happens?
All right. Many thanks for that. Priscilla, very briefly, as we wind up, how then as a society do also boldly confront social norms and practices rooted in patriarchy?
I agree with the last speaker that this is a discussion for both men and women, that we have enough challenges as a country, challenges that we should overcome. And so we need to close ranks and move together without a lot of, sort of leaving the traditional and cultural negative practices behind, carrying the positive ones. Dowry has survived. Nobody complains about the dowry, the dancing and the engagements that goes on. But all of these negative traditional practices, some of which we have found are not even based on culture. In traditional African culture, men were not allowed to beat women, for example. Men never used to rape women, even in traditional African culture. So we need to leave the FGM, leave the child sexual abuse, and get a country where we confront health challenges together, we confront education challenges together, and I think that way the country is going to develop faster and to prosper, both men and women.
That's a great point to end it on. Priscilla Nyakabi joining us live from our city center studios. She is a former women representative from Nyeri County. We've also been speaking to Ogutu Okudo, who is the founder of Women in Energy and Extractives Africa. And last but not least, Catherine Omanyo, who is a gender activist. And that brings us to a close on our discussion on the big story tonight. Parity with women is the best driving force in achieving economic growth and wealth creation in the country. It is a conversation we'll continue on our social media platforms. The hashtag is The Big Story. Good evening and happy International Women's Day to you.